On the morning of February 19th, 2013, a maintenance worker climbs onto the Cecil's roof to fix low water pressure. He reaches a metal hatch, pulls, and the smell hits first. Inside one of 4 rooftop tanks, each built to hold 1,000 gallons, a young woman floats faced up, clothes drifting beside her. For guests downstairs, the water has tasted strange for days. For the hotel, this is just the latest emergency. But the Cecil was not born as a crime scene. It opened in the roaring 1920s as a glamorous address. So how did it become a building that seems to collect death, a palace built for strangers? In December of 1924, the Cecil opens its doors, and Los Angeles sells a promise it cannot enforce. The lobby gleams. Marble floors catch the California light filtering through tall windows. Brass fixtures shine at the front desk. Potted palms stand in corners like sentries. The elevator cage is ornamental ironwork, the kind that announces arrival, not just transport. 14 stories rise above South Main Street, and every floor holds the same calculation. Fill the rooms, turn them over, fill them again. This is not a home. It is a machine designed for strangers. The Cecil Hotel Company spends $700,000 to build it. That is nearly $11 million in today's money, poured into concrete, steel, and the fantasy of permanence. The building offers 700 rooms at its peak capacity, though numbers will shift as walls move and managers chase profit. Downtown Los Angeles in 1924 is the center of everything, and oil money flows through the streets. The film industry is growing. Streetcars connect the grid. A hotel near Main and 7th can charge for location and call it luxury. But the business model has a flaw. The Cecil is not built for the wealthy who want suites and privacy. It is built for volume, traveling salesmen, visitors passing through, people who need a bed, a bathroom, and a reason to leave by morning. The rooms are small, the walls are thin, the turnover is constant. The building demands to be filled, and filling it means lowering standards just enough to stay competitive. The exterior tries to compensate. Beaux-Arts details dress the facade. The upper floors step back in the style of the era, creating terraces that will never be used. From the street, the Cecil looks like ambition made solid. Inside, it is a grid of identical doors, identical windows, identical problems waiting to multiply. The owners understand the gamble. A grand hotel needs grand guests, but grand guests do not stay in buildings designed like filing cabinets. So, the Cecil splits the difference. It offers the appearance of elegance at a price point that attracts the desperate, the transient, and the anonymous. It opens with optimism, but the optimism is structural, not human. The building does not care who fills it. It only cares that someone does. By the end of opening week, the Cecil is already what it will always be, a beautiful shell with no margin for care. The staff is lean. The oversight is minimal. The rooms turn over so fast that names barely matter. Guests check in, sleep, check out, and the cycle begins again. The building survives on volume, and volume erases intimacy. The question forms early, though no one asks it aloud yet. What happens to a building built to be filled when the city's money moves away? The neighborhood that turned on it. The Cecil does not collapse overnight. It shrinks year by year as downtown's gravity shifts and cheap rooms become the product. The Depression arrives in 1929, and Los Angeles learns what every American city learns. Grandeur is expensive to maintain. The film industry moves west toward Hollywood. The oil executives build estates in Pasadena. Downtown becomes a place to work, not a place to live, and certainly not a place to spend money on hotel rooms. The Cecil's rates drop, the clientele changes, the polished brass at the front desk loses its shine, and no one bothers to restore it. By the 1940s, Skid Row is no longer a concept. It is a district spreading east from Main Street like a stain. Flop houses open, missions serve meals, men without work gather on corners. The Cecil sits at the edge of this zone, close enough to feel the weight, but far enough to still call itself respectable. It lowers its prices again. It stops asking questions. It takes cash and offers keys, and if the guests look worn, that is Los Angeles, not the hotel's fault. The 1950s bring urban renewal plans that gut entire blocks but leave Skid Row untouched. City planners decide, consciously or not, that some neighborhoods exist to contain the problems other neighborhoods refuse. The missions stay open, the shelters multiply. The Cecil becomes part of the infrastructure of poverty, a place where a room costs $3 a night and no one expects you to stay long. The building's location, once an asset, becomes a trap. It cannot move. It cannot reinvent itself without money, and money does not flow toward buildings surrounded by desperation. The rooms grow shabbier, the carpets wear through, the elevator breaks and gets patched and breaks again. The staff shrinks to a skeleton crew, a desk clerk, a maintenance man, a housekeeper who cannot possibly clean 700 rooms. By the 1960s, downtown Los Angeles is a place people avoid after dark. The Cecil is full, but full of people who have nowhere else to go. Pensioners on fixed incomes, drifters passing through, men just released from hospitals or jails who need a bed while they figure out what comes next. The building does not judge. It cannot afford to. Every empty room is lost revenue, and revenue is survival. The landlords change hands. Ownership becomes a shell game of limited liability companies and distant investors who see the Cecil as a tax write-off, not a legacy. No one spends money on upgrades. The building decays in slow motion, one broken window and one peeling wall at a time. The neighborhood decays with it. The Cecil becomes known, quietly, as a last resort, a place where you go when every other option has closed. The desk clerks stop asking for ID. The locks on the doors are old and loose. The fire escapes rust. The building survives, but survival is not the same as thriving. It is a holding pattern, and holding patterns can last for decades. When a district becomes a containment zone, who gets contained inside the walls of the reputation that paid the bills? By the time the Cecil is known for tragedy, tragedy has become a kind of marketing, even when nobody admits it. The first confirmed suicide happens in 1931. A guest named W.K. Norton takes poison in his room. The newspapers report it on page 12. The hotel reopens the room within days. There is no memorial, no pause. The building has hundreds of rooms and cannot afford sentiment. The deaths continue. 1932, 1934, 1938. Some jump from windows. Some are found in bathtubs. Some simply stop breathing in rooms that will be rented again by nightfall. The Cecil does not cause these deaths, but it also does not prevent them. The windows do not lock securely. The staff does not check on guests who disappear for days. The building offers privacy to people who need witnesses. By the 1950s, the pattern is visible to anyone paying attention. Journalists start calling the Cecil the Suicide Hotel. The nickname is grotesque, but it also spreads the name. People hear about the Cecil and come to see it, either out of morbid curiosity or because they recognize themselves in its desperation. The building's infamy becomes its advertisement. The deaths are not random. They cluster in specific locations: the 7th floor, the 9th floor, the stairwell between the 3rd and 4th floors. Whether this is coincidence or architecture is impossible to say. Maybe certain hallways feel darker. Maybe certain windows open more easily. Maybe despair just needs a stage, and the Cecil offers plenty of stages. In 1964, a woman named Goldie Osgood is raped, stabbed, and murdered in her room. She is a retired telephone operator living in the Cecil on a pension. Her killer, Jacques Ellinger, is a former employee. He is caught, convicted, and imprisoned. The Cecil continues. The room is cleaned and rented. The murder becomes another entry in a growing ledger of violence that the building absorbs without changing. The hotel survives by staying open. That is the contradiction at its core. To stay open, it must accept anyone who can pay. To accept anyone, it must lower its standards of security, oversight, and care. The lower the standards, the more vulnerable the guests. The more vulnerable the guests, the more likely tragedy becomes. And tragedy, once it accumulates, becomes the story people tell about the place. By the 1970s, the Cecil is full again, but full in a way that no glossy brochure could sell. It houses long-term residents who pay weekly rates and short-term visitors who disappear before checkout. The building holds 500 rooms now, after renovations that carved larger spaces into smaller ones. The lobby still has its marble, but the marble is cracked. The elevators still run, but they shudder and groan. The building looks tired, and tired buildings attract tired people. The legend starts to harden. Ghost stories circulate. Guests report cold spots, strange sounds, shadows in hallways. Whether these stories are true or invented does not matter. They spread. They bring attention. Attention brings guests. Some people book rooms at the Cecil specifically because they have heard it is haunted. The building becomes a destination for dark tourism before that phrase exists. The management does not advertise the deaths, but they also do not hide them. The Cecil's reputation becomes a kind of currency, traded in whispers and late-night conversations. The building is known, and being known keeps it alive, even if what it is known for is death. The question forms again, sharper now. If a building survives by attracting the desperate and the curious, what happens when desperation and curiosity bring in something worse? When safety became optional? The most frightening thing about the Cecil is not a ghost story. It is how many small rules can be ignored at once. A hotel is supposed to be a controlled environment. Guests check in with identification. Staff monitor entrances. Cameras watch lobbies. Doors lock from the inside, and fire exits stay clear. Elevators require keys for rooftop access. These are not luxuries, they are minimums, written into city codes and insurance policies. The Cecil, by the 1980s, follows almost none of them consistently. The building still stands 14 stories tall. It still holds approximately 600 rooms after various configurations. The rooftop still has 4 water tanks, each holding 1,000 gallons to supply the building's plumbing. But the systems that should protect the people inside those rooms have eroded. The front desk does not always ask for ID. The security cameras are old, poorly placed, or broken. The locks on guest room doors are loose enough that a credit card can jimmy them open. The fire doors in the stairwells do not latch. The rooftop access is supposed to be locked, but maintenance workers lose keys, and keys get copied, and sometimes the lock just does not work. The staff is stretched impossibly thin. 1 or 2 desk clerks cover 24-hour shifts. Housekeeping cannot possibly clean 600 rooms with the crew they have. Maintenance responds to emergencies but cannot prevent them. There is no security guard walking the halls, no manager checking on long-term residents, no system for noticing when someone has not been seen in days. The building is too big and the budget is too small, and the gap between those two facts swallows accountability. The elevators become a case study in neglect. The Cecil has multiple elevator shafts, but only some of them are operational at any given time. The controls are outdated. The doors stick. The emergency phones inside the cabs often do not work. A guest can get stuck between floors and wait hours for help. The elevators also access the rooftop, if you know which button to press and whether the lock has been bypassed. This is not a secret, it is just not advertised. The stairwells are worse. 14 floors mean 13 flights of stairs, and most of those stairwells are dim, rarely patrolled, and accessible from any floor. A person can enter the building through the lobby, walk to a stairwell, and move through the entire structure without being seen. The stairwells also lead to the roof. The roof is not fenced. The roof is flat, open, and high. It offers a view and a ledge, and the ledge has no barrier. Downtown Los Angeles by the 1980s is a patchwork of wealth and poverty pressed against each other with no buffer. Skid Row is 10 blocks wide and holds thousands of people living on the streets or in shelters. The Cecil sits at the edge of this district, charging rates low enough to compete with flop houses, but high enough to call itself a hotel. It attracts a mix: tourists who booked online and did not read reviews, backpackers stretching a budget, low-income residents who have lived there for years, and people in crisis who need a room and do not ask questions. This mix is volatile. The building has no way to separate populations or provide the kind of targeted support some guests need. A person experiencing a mental health crisis sleeps 2 doors down from a family on vacation. A registered offender lives on the same floor as a college student. The building cannot sort, cannot monitor, cannot intervene. It can only collect rent and hope nothing explodes. The math is brutal. 600 rooms, 70 to 80% occupancy on average, and a nightly rate hovering around $40 to $60 in the late 2000s. That generates roughly $25,000 to $30,000 a night in gross revenue. Out of that comes payroll, utilities, property taxes, insurance, and maintenance. There is no cushion. The building survives on volume, and volume requires keeping doors open, standards low, and questions unasked. In a building this big, what does accountability even look like? The killers who chose this address. A serial killer does not need a haunted hotel. He needs a place where nobody asks questions and everybody keeps moving. Richard Ramirez checks into the Cecil sometime in 1985. The exact dates are murky because the Cecil does not keep meticulous records, and Ramirez does not advertise his presence. He is 25 years old. He pays cash. He rents a room on one of the upper floors. He comes and goes at odd hours. None of this is unusual. At the Cecil, odd is average. The Night Stalker attacks begin in June of 1985. A man breaks into homes across Los Angeles and kills with randomness that defies profiling. He shoots some victims. He beats others. He assaults women. He draws pentagrams on walls. The city panics. Police chase leads that go nowhere. Ramirez moves through the chaos like smoke, and when he needs a place to sleep, he returns to the Cecil. The hotel is not complicit. It is indifferent, which is functionally the same thing. The desk clerks do not ask what Ramirez does during the day. The housekeepers do not report the blood-stained clothes he allegedly discards in bins. The other guests do not notice, or if they notice, they do not report, because at the Cecil, minding your own business is survival. The building offers anonymity, and anonymity is exactly what Ramirez needs. Downtown Los Angeles in the mid-1980s is a landscape of extremes. The financial district gleams 3 blocks west. Skid Row festers 3 blocks east. The Cecil sits in the transitional zone where a man covered in blood could walk down the street and people would step around him, not because they do not care, but because intervening feels dangerous. The city has trained its residents to look away. Ramirez is caught in August of 1985, not because of the Cecil, but because a teenager in East Los Angeles recognizes him from a police sketch and chases him down. The connection to the Cecil comes out later, during the investigation. Journalists swarm the hotel. Camera crews film the exterior. The building's managers confirm that Ramirez stayed there, but they frame it as coincidence, not conspiracy. The Cecil, they insist, is just a hotel, but the damage is done. The Night Stalker becomes part of the Cecil's legend. People hear the name Richard Ramirez and think of the Cecil. They hear the Cecil and think of serial killers. The association is not fair, but fairness does not matter. The building has become a symbol, and symbols do not need accuracy, only repetition. Jack Unterweger arrives in 1991. He is an Austrian journalist researching a story about crime in Los Angeles. He is also a convicted murderer, released from prison after serving 15 years and rebranded as a reformed intellectual. He checks into the Cecil. He writes articles. He charms people. And while he is in Los Angeles, 3 sex workers are murdered. Unterweger is not caught immediately. He returns to Austria, continues his journalism career, and evades suspicion until forensic evidence links him to the murders. He is extradited, convicted, and kills himself in prison. The Cecil is, again, a footnote, but footnotes accumulate, and the Cecil's footnotes are written in blood. The hotel does not attract killers because it is cursed. It attracts them because it is practical. The rooms are cheap. The location is central. The oversight is non-existent. A person can check in under a fake name, pay cash, and vanish into a building with 600 other anonymous faces. The Cecil offers cover, not because it is evil, but because it is indifferent, and indifference, at scale, becomes a kind of complicity. The media loves the story. Hotel of Horrors, the deadliest hotel in Los Angeles. The headlines write themselves. The Cecil becomes shorthand for urban decay, a place where the city's failures concentrate and curdle. The building does not fight the narrative. It cannot afford to. Infamy brings guests, and guests pay rent, and rent keeps the lights on. The legend grows. The Cecil is a magnet for darkness. But the truth is simpler and more damning. The Cecil is not cursed. It is neglected. And neglect, given enough time and enough victims, looks indistinguishable from malice. A viral mystery finds the roof. When Elisa Lam vanishes, the Cecil becomes global content, and the internet turns a real death into a live puzzle. Elisa Lam is 21 years old. She is a student from Vancouver, traveling alone through California. She checks into the Cecil on January 26, 2013. She books a shared dormitory room through the stay on Main Hostel, which operates inside the Cecil under a rebranding effort we will examine later. She plans to stay a few days, see Los Angeles, and move on to San Diego. She posts on social media. She writes in her blog. She seems excited, hopeful, and alone. January 31st is the last day anyone sees her alive. She is supposed to check out. She does not. The hostel staff does not notice immediately. The building is busy, the turnover is constant, and one missing guest does not trigger alarms. And her family in Canada notices first. She stops answering calls. She stops posting online. They contact the Los Angeles Police Department on February 1st. The police visit the Cecil on February 6th. The investigation begins slowly. The Cecil has hundreds of guests. The records are incomplete. The cameras are scattered and old. The police review footage from the lobby, the hallways, the elevators. Most of it is useless, but one clip stops them. The timestamp reads February 1st. The location is an elevator on the 14th floor. The footage is 4 minutes long, and it is strange. Elisa Lam enters the elevator alone. She presses multiple buttons on the panel. The doors do not close. She steps into the hallway, looks left, looks right, steps back into the elevator. She presses more buttons. She moves to the corner of the elevator and stands with her back to the wall. She waves her hands in the air, speaking to someone the camera cannot see. She steps out again, waits, steps back in. The doors still do not close. She leaves the frame. The elevator doors finally shut, and the car moves. The footage ends. The police release the video on February 13th. They hope someone will recognize her. Instead, the internet recognizes a mystery. The video goes viral. Millions of people watch Elisa Lam press buttons, hide in the corner, talk to the air. Theories explode. She is running from someone. She is playing a game. She is possessed. She is high. She is having a breakdown. The footage is grainy, unsettling, and open to interpretation, which makes it perfect for the internet's favorite pastime, solving puzzles that may not have solutions. The paranormal community seizes the video. They analyze her hand movements. They claim she is performing a ritual to ward off spirits. They point to the Cecil's history and say the building is haunted, and Elisa Lam is proof. The true crime community builds timelines. They interview guests who stayed at the Cecil that week. They find inconsistencies in the police report. The conspiracy theorists arrive last and loudest. They say the video is edited. They say the government is involved. They say Elisa Lam was murdered and the Cecil is covering it up. None of these people know Elisa Lam. They know a 4-minute video and a list of Google searches. But the internet does not require intimacy. It requires content. And Elisa Lam, missing and silent, becomes the perfect vessel for projection. February 19th arrives. The guests on the lower floors of the Cecil complain about the water. It tastes strange. It looks dark. The pressure is weak. A maintenance worker climbs to the roof to check the tanks. The roof access is supposed to be locked, but the lock is broken or bypassed or never installed properly in the first place. The worker opens the hatch on one of the 4 tanks. Each tank holds 1,000 gallons and sits open to the air, covered only by a removable lid. The smell tells him everything before he looks inside. Elisa Lam is floating near the surface. She is naked. Her clothes are found next to her body, drifting in the water. The police drain the tank. They recover her remains. The autopsy finds no trauma, no drugs, no signs of foul play. The coroner rules it an accidental drowning, possibly linked to a bipolar disorder that Elisa Lam had disclosed in her blog. The internet does not accept this. The official story has too many gaps. How did she access the roof? Why was she naked? How did she get into the tank? The physics seem impossible. The tank is 10 feet tall. The ladder is difficult to climb. The lid is heavy. Could one person, alone and disoriented, navigate all of that? The The skeptics say no. The skeptics say the Cecil is hiding something. The alternative explanation is simpler but harder to accept. Elisa Lam was in crisis. She stopped taking her medication. She became disoriented. The Cecil's rooftop access was not secured. The tanks were not locked. She climbed, she fell, or jumped. She drowned. The building's negligence turned a mental health emergency into a death, and the internet turned that death into entertainment. The Cecil's failures are concrete. The rooftop door should have been locked. The tanks should have been sealed. The staff should have noticed a guest missing for 2 weeks. But the Cecil operates on minimal staffing, minimal oversight, and a business model that prioritizes occupancy over safety. Elisa Lam slipped through every gap the building had, and the building had many gaps. The legacy is noise. Her death is discussed more than her life. Her name becomes synonymous with mystery, not personhood. The Cecil becomes a pilgrimage site for YouTubers and ghost hunters. The building profits from her tragedy without acknowledging it, and the questions harden into folklore. Is the Cecil haunted, or is it just broken? The answer is both, and neither. The building is not possessed, but it is careless, and carelessness at the Cecil kills. Rebranding cannot erase a century. In 2011, the Cecil tries to escape itself with a new name, but a building cannot outrun its address. The Stay on Main opens inside the Cecil Hotel in 2011, 2 years before Elisa Lam checks in, and 4 years before the name becomes inescapable. The concept is simple. Rebrand part of the building as a hostel, attract younger travelers, charge lower rates, and ride the wave of budget tourism that is reshaping downtown Los Angeles. The Cecil keeps its name for the main hotel. Stay on Main takes over a section of the lower floors. They share the same entrance, the same elevators, the same water tanks, and the same fundamental problems. The rebranding is cosmetic. The Stay on Main rooms are painted brighter colors. The common areas get new furniture. The marketing emphasizes community, adventure, and affordability. Backpackers from Europe and Asia book beds in shared dormitories for $20 to $30 a night. They do not know the building's history. They do not Google the address before booking. They see the photos online, read the reviews that mention location and price, and reserve a bed. The math seems promising. The Cecil has roughly 600 individual rooms across 14 floors. Stay on Main converts a portion of that space into hostel-style accommodations. 4 to 6 bed dorms, shared bathrooms, communal lounges. The hostel guests and the hotel guests are supposed to coexist, separated by floors and entrances, but the building does not enforce that separation. A hostel guest can take the elevator to any floor. A hotel guest can wander into the hostel lounge. The building is porous, and porousness is a liability no one quantifies. The staff does not double. The security does not improve. The cameras are still old. The rooftop is still accessible. The Cecil simply splits its identity and hopes that the brighter half distracts from the darker half. It is a gamble, and for a while, it works. Occupancy rises. Revenue stabilizes. The Stay on Main becomes a known name in the budget travel circuit. But a new name cannot erase the structure beneath it. The plumbing is the same. The wiring is the same. The thin walls, the broken locks, the stairwells that echo with footsteps at 3 in the morning are all the same. The building still holds long-term residents who pay weekly rates and live in rooms that have not been updated since the 1970s. The building still attracts people in crisis who see a cheap bed as a temporary solution. And the building still operates with the same minimal oversight that has defined it for decades. The contradiction sharpens. The stay on Main advertises itself as safe, social, and centrally located. The reviews on travel websites praise the price and the proximity to public transit. But the one-star reviews tell a different story. Guests report feeling unsafe. They hear shouting in the halls. They see people loitering in stairwells who are not registered guests. They complain about the smell, the noise, the sense that something is wrong, but they cannot name it. The management responds to complaints with the same script. The area is urban. Downtown Los Angeles has its challenges. The hotel does its best. The script is not wrong, but it is incomplete. The challenges are not just outside the building. They are inside it. The stay on Main can paint the walls and update the website, but it cannot change the fact that it shares space with a structure designed to absorb neglect. The scale remains overwhelming. 14 floors, approximately 600 rooms at various times, now split between two brands. Hundreds of keys in circulation. Multiple entrances, shared elevators. A single front desk trying to manage check-ins for both the hotel and the hostel. The rooftop water tanks still sit open to the air, still accessible to anyone who finds the unlocked door, still waiting to become a problem. When Elisa Lam goes missing in 2013, the Stay on Main brand becomes a liability. Journalists do not distinguish between the hostel and the hotel. They report that she stayed at the Cecil, and the Cecil is what the public remembers. The rebranding effort collapses under the weight of one death, and the Stay on Main name fades. By 2015, the split identity is abandoned. The building is the Cecil again, fully and openly, because trying to be anything else requires resources the building does not have. The question sharpens. Is a new sign a solution or a disguise? Renovation meets the real world. Plans promise rebirth, yet the Cecil's problems are structural, human, and political, not just cosmetic. In 2017, the Cecil closes for renovations. The announcement comes with renderings, budgets, and timelines. The building will be transformed into a mix of hotel rooms, affordable housing, and retail space. The facade will be restored. The interiors will be gutted and rebuilt. The Cecil will finally escape its past and become a model for adaptive reuse in downtown Los Angeles. The plan is ambitious, expensive, and almost immediately complicated. The budget is estimated at $100 million. That is not a small number, even for a 14-story building with hundreds of units. The money is supposed to come from a combination of private investment and public incentives tied to affordable housing commitments. The developers promise that a significant portion of the renovated building will be reserved for low-income residents. The city, eager to address its housing crisis, supports the plan. But the building resists. The infrastructure is older than most of the workers tasked with updating it. The plumbing is a maze of lead pipes and outdated valves. The electrical system does not meet modern codes. The elevators need to be completely replaced, not just repaired. The facade, which looks solid from the street, is crumbling in places. Every wall opened reveals another problem. The budget swells. The timeline stretches. Downtown Los Angeles is transforming around the Cecil. New apartment towers rise on nearby blocks. Coffee shops and galleries open on streets that were empty 5 years ago. The city is trying to reclaim downtown as a residential neighborhood, not just a business district. But the transformation is uneven. Skid Row is still 10 blocks away, still holding thousands of people in tents and shelters, and still growing. The developers renovating the Cecil are betting that downtown's momentum will eventually absorb Skid Row's chaos. But that bet is speculative, and speculative bets do not help the people sleeping on sidewalks tonight. The renovation stalls. The developers run out of money. The city's affordable housing incentives are not enough to cover the overruns. Private investors grow nervous. The building sits empty, half-gutted, wrapped in scaffolding and permits. Squatters move in. Vandals break windows. The Cecil, even closed, cannot escape being the Cecil. By 2019, the project is officially delayed. The developers renegotiate terms. The city extends deadlines. The building remains closed, a shell waiting for someone to finish what was started. The neighbors watch and wonder if the Cecil is being saved or just left to rot in a different configuration. The political context cannot be ignored. Los Angeles is in the middle of a homelessness crisis that has no clear solution. The city has 60,000 people living on the streets. Shelters are full. Affordable housing projects move slowly. The Cecil, sitting empty with 600 potential units, becomes a symbol of wasted capacity. Advocates ask why the building is being renovated for future tenants when current need is so desperate. Developers respond that renovation takes time, money, and permits, none of which can be rushed. The tension is real. The Cecil could house hundreds of people tomorrow if safety standards were ignored. But ignoring safety standards is what made the Cecil dangerous in the first place. The building needs structural work, fire suppression systems, secure doors, and professional management. Filling it with vulnerable people before those systems are in place would recreate the exact conditions that led to deaths, assaults, and neglect. The renovation eventually resumes. New investors are found. The timeline is revised again. The Cecil will reopen, but not as a hotel. It will become supportive housing, a term that sounds hopeful but carries its own complications. The plan is to provide not just rooms, but services, case management, mental health support, job training. The building will be more than shelter. It will be a system. The question forms again. Who is a historic building for, if the people inside are treated as temporary? A new mission, the same old rot. In December of 2021, the Cecil reopens for supportive housing, and hope walks into a building with a long memory. The renovation is finished, mostly. The Cecil now holds 600 units, each roughly 100 to 150 square feet. That is smaller than a standard hotel room, but larger than a shelter bed. Each unit has a door that locks, a window, and access to communal bathrooms and kitchens. The building is managed by a non-profit that specializes in supportive housing. The residents are selected through a voucher system, prioritizing people who have been homeless for extended periods and who need intensive case management. The promise is stability. The residents will have a place to sleep, access to social workers, and support navigating mental health treatment, addiction recovery, and job placement. The building will not just house people, it will help them rebuild. The nonprofit hires staff, case managers, security guards, maintenance workers, front desk clerks. The budget is tight, but the mission is clear. The residents move in. Some have been homeless for years. Some are elderly, disabled, or medically fragile. Some are in recovery. Some are still using. Some have mental health diagnoses that require medication and monitoring. All of them need stability. But stability is not something the Cecil has ever provided, and changing the mission statement does not change the bones of the building. The problems surface quickly. The units are tiny. The communal spaces are crowded. The bathrooms are shared among too many people. The kitchen facilities are insufficient. The noise carries through thin walls. The building, which was never designed for long-term residential living, strains under the weight of 600 people trying to make it a home. The staffing is inadequate. The nonprofit budgeted for a certain number of case managers, but 600 high need residents require more support than the budget allows. The case managers are overwhelmed. The security guards are spread thin. The maintenance crew cannot keep up with repairs. The front desk clerks are not trained social workers, but they are expected to de-escalate crises, enforce rules, and manage conflicts between residents. Reports begin to leak. Residents complain about unsafe conditions. The elevators break down. The plumbing fails. The heating is inconsistent. There are reports of violence, theft, and drug use in common areas. The building, despite the renovation, still feels like the Cecil, a place where people are warehoused, not cared for. The nonprofit responds with policies. Rules are posted, curfews are enforced, visitors are screened. But rules only work when there is capacity to enforce them, and the Cecil does not have that capacity. The building is too big, the population is too complex, and the resources are too limited. The staff does their best, but their best is not enough to overcome the structural realities of managing 600 vulnerable people in a building designed for transients. The city watches. The Cecil was supposed to be a success story, a model for converting underutilized buildings into supportive housing. But success requires more than renovation. It requires ongoing funding, professional management, and a recognition that supportive housing is not a one-time fix, but a continuous process. The Cecil is getting none of those things consistently. The residents caught in the middle experience the same neglect in a different package. The rooms are cleaner, the doors lock better, and there is a case manager somewhere in the building. But the building still feels hostile. The hallways still echo. The elevators still break. The sense of being forgotten still lingers. The question sharpens. Can the Cecil ever be managed like a home, not a headline? The tenants become the story. The Cecil's newest residents are not characters in a legend. They are people trying to sleep through noise, leaks, and fear. The woman on the 5th floor moved in 6 months ago. She is in her 60s, diabetic, and walks with a cane. Her unit is 120 square feet. The bed takes up most of the floor. The window looks onto an air shaft. She shares a bathroom with 9 other people on her floor. The toilet clogs often. The shower has no hot water some mornings. She does not complain to the front desk because the front desk is staffed by one person who is also answering phones, checking in visitors, and trying to stop an argument in the lobby. The man on the 9th floor has been homeless for 12 years. He is a veteran. He has PTSD and a traumatic brain injury. His case manager visits once a week, sometimes less. The case manager is handling 40 other clients. The man needs daily check-ins, medication monitoring, and help applying for disability benefits. He gets a 10-minute conversation and a reminder to attend group therapy in the basement. He does not go to group therapy because the basement smells like mold and the elevator is broken. The young woman on the 3rd floor is in recovery. She has been clean for 8 months. Her sobriety is fragile. The communal kitchen on her floor is where people smoke and deal. She avoids it. She eats in her room. She is lonely, but loneliness is safer than relapse. Her case manager tells her to focus on her goals. Her goals include finding a job, saving money, and moving out of the Cecil. She has been on the waiting list for subsidized housing for 2 years. The waiting list has not moved. These are not outliers. These are the norms. The Cecil in 2023 holds 600 people, each with a story that ends in a 100-square-foot room with a lock and a prayer. The building offers shelter, but shelter is not the same as home. The residents know the difference. So does the staff, but the staff cannot fix the gap between what the building promises and what it delivers. The numbers are bleak, and 600 units, roughly 400 case managers needed for adequate support based on standard ratios of 1 case manager per 15 high-need clients. The Cecil has 20. The security team is supposed to monitor 14 floors, multiple entrances, and common areas that include kitchens, lounges, and laundry rooms. The team has 8 guards covering 3 shifts. The maintenance crew is supposed to respond to plumbing failures, electrical issues, elevator breakdowns, and heating complaints. The crew has 5 people for a building that is 100 years old. The model is broken. Supportive housing requires support, and the Cecil does not have the resources to provide it. The nonprofit managing the building is underfunded. The city provides some subsidies, but the subsidies do not cover the true cost of operating a high-need residential facility. The gap is filled with overworked staff, deferred maintenance, and residents who absorb the consequences. The question is not whether the residents deserve better. They do. The question is whether the system that placed them in the Cecil cares enough to fund the support it promised. The answer, so far, is no, when notoriety goes on the market. After everything, the Cecil is listed for sale, and the question becomes brutally simple. What is a stigma worth? In March of 2024, the Cecil Hotel is officially put on the market. The listing does not hide the building's history. It cannot. A simple internet search returns thousands of results. Night Stalker, Elisa Lam, suicides, hauntings, viral mysteries. The building's notoriety is public record, archived in documentaries, podcasts, and YouTube videos with millions of views. The question for potential buyers is not whether the Cecil has a past. It is whether that past can be monetized. The property is complex. The building itself is 15 stories, 14 above ground and 1 basement level. The structure is approximately 100 years old. The current configuration is 600 units of supportive housing, operated under a long-term lease by a nonprofit. The lease complicates the sale. The buyer inherits both the building and the obligations tied to it, including commitments to maintain affordable housing for a set number of years. The asking price is not publicly disclosed, but estimates place it in the range of $60 to $80 million. Now, that is lower than the cost of renovating it, which suggests the market does not believe the Cecil can be easily repurposed. The building's location is valuable. Downtown Los Angeles real estate is rising, but the building's reputation is a liability. No developer wants to attach their name to the Cecil unless they have a strategy to either embrace the infamy or erase it. 2 types of buyers circle. The first sees the Cecil as a historic property with potential for adaptive reuse. They imagine boutique hotels, mixed-use developments, or high-end residential conversions. These buyers believe that enough money and marketing can overwrite the building's past. They are wrong, but they are optimistic, and optimism drives real estate speculation. The second type sees the Cecil as a tourist attraction. They want to lean into the legend. They imagine ghost tours, themed hotel rooms, and partnerships with true crime media. They believe that people will pay to sleep in the building where Richard Ramirez stayed, to stand in the elevator where Elisa Lam was last seen, to drink overpriced cocktails in a lobby decorated with vintage crime scene photos. This is not compassion. This is capitalism finding a niche. The current residents are not part of these conversations. They live in the building while investors debate its future. They hear rumors about the sale. They worry about displacement. The nonprofit managing the property reassures them that their housing is protected by the lease. But leases can be renegotiated, and protections can erode. The residents know better than to trust promises. The sale stalls. Potential buyers tour the building, review financials, and walk away. The Cecil is expensive to operate, difficult to rebrand, and entangled in legal and political complexities. The supportive housing commitment limits flexibility. The building's age requires constant maintenance. The location, while improving, is still adjacent to Skid Row, and adjacency matters to investors. The Cecil remains on the market, unsold and occupied. It is neither a success story nor a complete failure. It is a building in limbo, waiting for someone to decide its value and its future. The question is, who profits and who pays? The investors profit from the building's infamy. The residents pay for its instability. The city profits from offloading responsibility. The victims, past and present, pay with their stories turned into content. The math is simple. A building is worth what someone will pay for it. The Cecil's worth includes its square footage, its location, and its legend. The legend is the wild card. It can be an asset or a curse, depending on who is buying and why. The Cecil's final trick. The Cecil survives by changing labels, yet every label keeps the same promise. Come inside and we will take care of you. The paranormal explanation for the Cecil is seductive. A building this old, this full of death, must be haunted. The ghost stories write themselves. The woman in the black dress seen on the 7th floor, the cold spot in the stairwell, the elevator that stops on the 9th floor with no one inside. These stories are told and retold, each iteration adding new details, new witnesses, new certainty. The building becomes a character in its own horror film, cursed and alive, drawing victims into its walls. But hauntings are metaphors. They are the stories we tell when the real explanation is too mundane, too systemic, too implicating. The Cecil is not cursed. It is neglected. The deaths that occurred there were not supernatural. They were preventable. Elisa Lam did not drown because of ghosts. She drowned because the rooftop was accessible, the tanks were unsealed, and the building's management prioritized cost-cutting over safety. The suicides were not drawn by paranormal forces. They were enabled by windows that did not lock, by staff who did not check on isolated guests, by a culture that treated human life as secondary to occupancy rates. The haunting narrative serves a function. It absolves. If the Cecil is cursed, then no one is responsible. The building becomes the villain, and the people who owned it, managed it, and profited from it are victims of the same dark forces. This is convenient. It is also false. The truth is structural. The Cecil was built in an era that valued volume over care. It survived the Depression, urban decay, and the collapse of downtown Los Angeles by lowering standards and accepting anyone who could pay. The building became a last resort, and last resorts do not have the luxury of safety. The owners, changing hands over decades, saw the Cecil as an investment, not a community. The managers, underfunded and understaffed, did what they could with what they had, which was never enough. The system, both economic and political, allowed the Cecil to operate as a holding tank for vulnerable people, because holding tanks are cheaper than solutions. The cycle repeats. The Cecil opens as a luxury hotel. It declines into a flophouse. It becomes infamous. It closes for renovation. It reopens as supportive housing. It is listed for sale. Each iteration promises care. Each iteration delivers neglect with a new name. The residents change, but the building's fundamental indifference remains. Los Angeles built the Cecil in 1924 as a monument to ambition. The city poured money into downtown, erected towers, and sold the dream of permanence. But permanence requires maintenance, and maintenance requires commitment, and commitment costs more than most people are willing to pay. The Cecil endures not because it is strong, but because tearing it down is more expensive than letting it stand. The question that opened this story returns, sharper now. How did a grand hotel become a building that seems to collect death? The answer is not ghosts. It is economics. It is policy. It is the distance between what a city promises and what it funds. Los Angeles promised that the Cecil would be a palace. Then it stopped paying for palace-level care. The building became what the city allowed it to become. The Cecil's legacy is a warning. Buildings do not create despair, but they can amplify it. A structure designed for transients will attract transient people. A place with minimal oversight will enable those who need to hide. A building that prioritizes profit over people will eventually pay for that choice in lives. The Cecil paid, the residents paid, the victims paid, but the city, the investors, the managers who cut corners, they moved on. They attached new names to old buildings. They promised support and delivered shelter. They marketed safety and sold access. The Cecil survives because enough people profit from its survival, and the people who suffer from it have no power to tear it down. The final trick is this: the Cecil will outlast us all. It will be renovated again, renamed again, repurposed again. It will house new people with new needs, and those needs will be met inadequately, and the cycle will continue. The building will survive because buildings always survive longer than the people inside them, and the stories will grow, layer upon layer, until the truth is buried under legend, and the legend becomes easier to sell. If a city can build a dream in stone, why does it struggle to maintain basic care? Because dreams are one-time investments. Care is an ongoing cost. And costs, in the end, are what cities choose to cut. The Cecil stands. The question remains: